For 12 years, my world was contained within the gleaming glass tower of Sterling Asset Management. I was Elias Vance, head of compliance, and my currency was trust. In a world of sharks and charlatans, I was the guy who kept the firm honest. My team and I were the killjoys, the wet blankets, the ones who said no when the rockstar managing directors wanted to chase a risky alpha by bending the rules. My signature on a deal prospectus was the firm's seal of integrity, a guarantee that we had done our due diligence, that our clients' money was safe, and that the SEC wouldn't come knocking. My life was ordered, predictable, and secure. That security was more than professional pride. It was the bedrock on which my family stood. My 8-year-old daughter, Clara, was fighting a rare autoimmune disorder. The treatments were experimental, ruinously expensive, and only possible because of Sterling's top-tier health insurance. My loyalty to the firm wasn't just a sentiment. It was a necessity. The architect of my downfall was Julian Croft. He was everything. I wasn't. A Savile Row suit with a predator's smile, a charismatic MD who could sell sand in the Sahara. He treated the compliance department as a necessary evil, a hurdle to be charmed, bullied, or circumvented. We had a professionally cordial but icy relationship. He saw me as a glorified box ticker. I saw him as a beautifully packaged liability. The catalyst was a deal codenamed Project Chimera. It was a massive $2 billion private equity placement for a new alternative energy fund, the Evergreen Future Fund. On paper, it was a world changer. In reality, it was a house of cards. Julian brought it to me with his trademark swagger, expecting a quick sign-off. Elias, my man, he'd boomed, leaning over my desk, his cologne an assault on the senses. This is the one. This puts us on the map for the next decade. I spent the next 3 days doing what I do best, digging. And the deeper I dug, the worse. It smelled. The fund's capital structure was an opaque labyrinth of offshore shell corporations. The Know Your Customer Kick documentation was flimsy, almost laughably so. The risk disclosures were boilerplate, completely ignoring the volatile, unproven technology the fund was backing. It was designed to attract massive investment while hiding immense risk. I can't sign this, Julian, I said, sliding the prospectus back across my desk during our final meeting on the matter. The AML anti-money laundering red flags are everywhere. The beneficial ownership is untraceable. This isn't just risky, it's reckless. It feels like we're hiding something. His smile tightened, the charm evaporating to reveal the cold ambition beneath. Elias, the partners want this deal. The fee alone is 8 figures. We're not hiding anything. We're streamlining. For sophisticated investors. Sophisticated investors still deserve to know if their money is being funneled through the Cayman Islands to God knows where. Get me a clear UBOA, real ultimate beneficial owner and transparent risk models, and we can talk. Until then, my signature is not going on this. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes like chips of flint. You're a functionary, Elias. A speed bump. Don't ever forget that. He snatched the binder and stormed out. I felt a tremor of unease but stood by my decision. I was doing my job. I was protecting the firm. Kai documented my refusal, citing the specific compliance failures in a detailed memo, and saved it to the secure compliance server, a digital fortress I had designed myself. I slept soundly that night, convinced I had done the right thing. That was a Tuesday. On Friday afternoon, I was drafting a new internal audit protocol when an email from HR popped up. Subject: urgent meeting. My blood ran cold. I walked down to the 24th floor, a knot tightening in my stomach. Brenda from HR, a woman with a perpetually strained smile, and the firm's general counsel, Robert Sterling, were waiting for me. They didn't ask me to sit. Elias, Brenda began, avoiding my eyes. We're terminating your employment, effective immediately. The floor fell away. What? On what grounds? Robert slid a document across the table. It was the final prospectus for Project Chimera. And there, at the bottom of the compliance page, was my signature. A perfect digital forgery. The deal was submitted and approved, Robert said, his voice flat. This morning, a preliminary audit from the fund's side flagged a minor discrepancy. In reviewing the process, Julian Croft noted his concerns about the thoroughness of your review. A deeper look revealed what appears to be gross negligence on your part. You missed several key risk factors that Julian and his team had to correct at the last minute. I was speechless. It was a perfectly constructed corporate execution. They used my own diligence against me, framing my flagged concerns as things I had missed. The forgery was the kill shot. "That's not my signature," I stammered, my voice hoarse. I refused to sign. I have a memo documenting my refusal on the compliance server. Brenda gave me a look of pity. "Your network access was terminated an hour ago, Elias. A security detail is at your desk packing your personal effects. This is insane." Julian forged my name. Robert sighed, a sound of profound corporate boredom. "Elias, you're a senior employee. You know as well as I do that making such a serious, unsubstantiated allegation against a managing director is career suicide. We have a signed document. You have an opinion. The firm is backing the document." He slid another paper towards me. "This is your separation agreement. It includes a 4-week severance package, contingent on you signing an enhanced non-disclosure agreement. The NDA, the final nail, would legally bar me from ever discussing Project Chimera or the circumstances of my termination. They weren't just firing me, they were burying me. K and the health insurance." I asked, the words tasting like ash. "That expires at the end of the month," Brenda said softly. In that moment, professional devastation was eclipsed by a wave of pure, cold terror. Clara, her next round of infusions was in 6 weeks. The cost, uninsured, was more than I made in a year. They weren't just taking my job. They were threatening my daughter's life. I was escorted out of the building like a criminal. My box of personal items, a framed picture of my wife and Clara, a favorite coffee mug, a dozen useless compliance awards feeling heavier than lead. Standing on the pavement, the city lights blurring through my tears, the shock began to curdle into something else, something hot and sharp. They thought I was a functionary, a speed bump. They had underestimated me. They had used my family's vulnerability as leverage, believing it would break me. They were wrong. It would be the fuel for the fire that was about to consume them. Standing there in the shadow of the tower I had given my life to, I made a new vow. I would not seek justice. Justice was for victims. I would seek retribution. The first week was a blur of impotent rage and chilling practicality. I called a lawyer, a sharp litigator who specialized in employment law. He listened patiently, then gave me the brutal truth. "Elias, it's a he said, she said scenario, except he is a multi-billion-dollar asset management firm, and you are an unemployed guy with a conspiracy theory, the forged signature. You'd need a forensic expert, which is expensive. The memo on their server, it's their server. If it ever existed, it's gone now. The NDA is their shield. They can bleed you dry in discovery before you ever see a courtroom. My advice, take the severance and walk away." My call to Brenda in HR was even more demoralizing. She was a master of the corporate non-apology. "I understand this is a difficult transition, Elias. They're simply following standard procedure. The firm's position is final." She was a cog in the machine, and the machine was designed to crush people like me. Official channels were not just closed, they were barricaded and guarded. The despair was a physical weight. I'd sit at our small dining room table, staring at the mounting medical bills. The ticking clock on Clara's treatment getting louder with every passing day. My wife Helen was a rock, but I could see the fear in her eyes. It was that fear that finally shoved me from paralysis into action. Julian Croft had made this personal. He had targeted my family. That meant there were no more rules. My revenge would not be a messy emotional outburst. It would be a compliance check, a full forensic audit of Julian Croft's entire professional life, executed with the same meticulous, soul-crushing precision I had once used to protect the firm. He had used a forged signature to ruin me. I would use his own real-world signatures, his digital footprints, his habits, his arrogance to dismantle him. My first asset was knowledge. I had designed Sterling's compliance architecture. I knew its weaknesses, its backdoors, its legacy systems that no one but me remembered. I knew the data retention policies, the email archiving protocols, the way the servers logged user activity. They had taken my keys, but I still had the blueprints. My second asset was an unlikely ally. Her name was Nina Sharma, a junior analyst on my old team. She was brilliant, fiercely ethical, and had looked up to me. She was devastated when I was fired, and she didn't believe the official story for a second. I reached out to her through a secure messaging app using a burner phone. I didn't ask her to do anything illegal. I just asked her to keep her eyes and ears open. "They're treating Julian like a hero," she typed back one night. "He's parading the Chimera deal around like he won the Super Bowl. But it's weird. He's become incredibly paranoid about his documents. Shreds everything. Wipes his office whiteboard clean the second a meeting ends." That was the first breadcrumb. Paranoia. Julian was cleaning up his tracks, which meant there were tracks to clean. While Nina was my eyes inside, I began my own deep dive from the outside. Julian lived his life online with the same arrogance. He showed in the boardroom. His social media, his wife's blog, charity event photos, I scraped it all, building a detailed profile of his life. I learned his routines. The gym at 6 a.m., the same coffee shop every morning. It's the high-stakes poker game he played in every Thursday night at a private club. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My own exit paperwork. Buried deep in the standard employment contract I had signed 12 years prior was a clause I myself had championed. A forgotten relic from a post-Enron surge of corporate governance reform. Clause 47, the Material Integrity Proviso. It was a beautiful piece of legal craftsmanship. It stipulated that if an employee had evidence of material misrepresentation or fraudulent activity directly involving a C-level executive or managing director that posed a systemic risk to the firm, they could bypass the entire management, an HR chain of command, and report directly to the independent chairman of the board's audit committee. Crucially, contained a provision that offered whistleblower protections that superseded certain clauses of the standard NDA. Provided the claim was made in good faith and substantiated with credible evidence. They had handed me the key to their own dungeon. But I couldn't just invoke the clause. I needed a nuke. A piece of evidence so undeniable, so toxic, that the audit committee would have no choice but to act, and act decisively. The forged signature wasn't enough. It was my word against Julian's. Needed to prove why he forged it. I had to prove that Project Chimera wasn't just risky. It was dirty. I went back to my initial assessment. The untraceable beneficial owner. That was the linchpin. Julian hadn't just been lazy with the paperwork. He had been deliberately obstructive. He was hiding the UBO for a reason, using a dozen free trials for premium, financial intelligence databases, and my own saved research notes. I started pulling on the threads of the evergreen future fund shell corporations. It was a global goose chase, from Delaware to Panama to Cyprus. For weeks, I hit nothing but dead ends. Then I got a message from Nina. Something strange. Julian had a visitor today. No appointment. An Eastern European man, very severe looking. They met in a conference room that had the audio jammers turned on. The visitor log just says M. Sokolov. Mikhail Sokolov. The name meant nothing to me, but it was a thread. K ran the name through every database I could access. K, and then I found it. Not in a financial database, but in a 3-year-old report from an international human rights organization. Mikhail Sokolov was a known associate, a financial proxy for a sanctioned oligarch. A man with deep ties to a kleptocratic regime, blacklisted by the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Project Chimera wasn't just a risky investment. It was a multi-billion-dollar money laundering scheme designed to funnel sanctioned money into the legitimate U.S. financial system. Julian hadn't just bent the rules for a big commission. Hey, he had committed a federal crime, exposing sterling asset management to catastrophic legal and financial ruin. He had forged my signature to make me the scapegoat if it all went wrong. I now had the scope of his crime. I had the legal mechanism to report it. But I still lacked the smoking gun, the piece of evidence that tied Julian personally and knowingly to Sokolov and the sanctioned money. His paranoia was a fortress. I needed to get inside. And for that, I would have to stop being an analyst and start being a strategist. The investigation was over. The operation was about to begin. My kitchen table, once a landscape of medical bills and despair, transformed into a war room. The target was no longer just Julian Croft, but the entire edifice of lies he had built around Project Chimera. My objective was total annihilation, delivered not with a bomb, but with a single, perfectly crafted email. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, isolate the secondary. Julian wasn't working alone. His second in command was a sycophantic vice president named Leo Maxwell. Leo was ambitious, amoral, and utterly devoted to Julian. He was also sloppy. Nina had mentioned Leo loved to brag about the perks of working on Julian's team. I asked her to discreetly find out what those perks were. A week later, she sent me a file. It was a spreadsheet of Leo's expense reports for the past 6 months, which she had accessed under the pretext of a departmental budget review. It was a goldmine of petty corruption. 5-star hotel stays listed as client meetings on weekends. Lavish dinners for 2 expensed as team-building events. Even a charge for a high-end set of golf clubs coded as office supplies. It was death by 1,000 cuts. I couldn't go to HR myself. But I knew the firm's internal audit department had an anonymous tip line. I drafted a concise, professional-sounding email from a Proton Mail account, posing as a concerned colleague from the finance department. I laid out the discrepancies, cited the specific expense report numbers, and attached the spreadsheet. I made no mention of Julian or Chimera. I just lit a small controlled fire at the edges of his empire. 2 days later, Nina confirmed the result. Leo Maxwell was pulled into a meeting with internal audit and HR. He emerged pale and shaken. He was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Julian had lost his lieutenant. He was isolated, and my primary action had gone, completely undetected. More importantly, the sudden audit of his right-hand man would amplify his paranoia to a fever pitch. He'd be looking for traitors everywhere, never suspecting the attack was coming from outside the walls. Phase 2, the digital trap. I needed to link Julian to Sokolov. I needed to prove he knew who he was dealing with. A physical document would be ideal, but his shredder worked overtime. A digital file was more likely, but his work computer would be locked down. His weakness, I gambled, was his arrogance, his vanity. He wouldn't use a corporate-tissued laptop at his home. He'd have a top-of-the-line personal machine, and he'd feel safe on his home network. This was my biggest ethical leap. I needed access to his home Wi-Fi. It felt like a line I shouldn't cross, but then I looked at the picture of Clara on my desk, and the ethical debate in my head went silent. Using the information I'd gathered on his personal life, I learned that Julian had his home professionally outfitted with a smart home system from a specific local company. I called them, pretending to be Julian's new executive assistant, James. "Hi there, I said, affecting a harried, efficient tone. Mr. Croft is having some intermittent issues with his network connectivity. He's in back-to-back meetings all week, but asked me to arrange for a technician to just pop by and run a diagnostic. He said to tell you the Orion package is acting up again. I had gotten the package name from a photo of a smart home control panel visible in the background of his wife's Instagram post. It was a tiny detail, but it lent me instant credibility. The receptionist didn't hesitate. Of course, the master password on the account is his daughter's birthday, correct? Bingo. Social engineering 101. People are lazy with passwords. I had found his daughter's birthday on his wife's public Facebook page. That's the one, I confirmed. I now had the master password to his entire home network. I didn't need a technician. I canceled the appointment an hour later. That night, I parked my car 2 blocks from his lavish suburban home. Using a powerful Contenna directional Wi-Fi antenna, I was able to pick up his network signal. I logged in as the administrator. I didn't hack a thing. I walked right in the front door. I spent the next 2 hours meticulously and quietly navigating his digital life. I didn't download everything. It would be too noisy. I was looking for one thing only: a connection to Mikhail Sokolov. I found it in a password-protected folder on his cloud backup drive labeled Personal Projects. The password chimera to be for the $2 billion deal size. The man's ego was a security flaw in itself. Inside was a single encrypted file. A due diligence report from a third-party risk intelligence firm he had secretly commissioned. It was everything I needed. The report explicitly named Mikhail Sokolov and detailed his connections to the sanctioned oligarch. Warning of extreme reputational and legal risks and a high probability of OFAC violations. Julian had known. He had known from the very beginning. He had received the warning, buried the report, and forged my name on a document that claimed the exact opposite. I downloaded the file, along with the server logs showing the exact date and time he had accessed. This was the nuke. Phase 3. Weaponize the boardroom. I had the evidence. I had the legal mechanism in Clause 47. Now, I needed the right moment to deploy it. That moment would be Sterling's annual shareholder meeting in 9 days. Julian was scheduled to give a keynote presentation on the future of Alpha, with Project Chimera as his crowning achievement. He would be at the peak of his power and arrogance in a room full of the firm's most powerful people, including the board of directors. My final preparations were clinical. I compiled my evidence into a single devastating presentation. Exhibit A: my original memo refusing to sign off on Chimera, which I had backed up to my personal cloud storage before I was fired. A habit of prudence. Exhibit B: a sworn affidavit from a certified forensic document examiner confirming my signature was a digital forgery, complete with a timestamp analysis suggesting it was applied after my last official login. Exhibit C: the complete dossier on Mikhail Sokolov and his OFAC-sanctioned connections. Exhibit D: the secret due diligence report from Julian's personal cloud drive, proving he knew about Sokolov. Exhibit E: the server logs from his home network showing when he accessed that report. The package was ironclad. The night before the shareholder meeting, I sat at my computer, my heart a steady, cold drum. I drafted the email. To Henry Drummond, Chairman of the Audit Committee, CC General Counsel, CEO. Subject: invocation of Clause 47. Urgent notification of material FRAUD. Mr. Drummond, pursuant to Clause 47 of the Sterling Asset Management Employment Agreement, this email serves as formal notification of material fraudulent activity posing a systemic risk to the firm. This activity was orchestrated by Managing Director Julian Croft in relation to Project Chimera. The evidence, which is comprehensive and irrefutable, proves that Mr. Croft knowingly engaged a financial proxy for an OFAC-sanctioned individual, exposing the firm to severe federal penalties. Furthermore, He deliberately concealed this information and forged my signature on compliance documents to execute the deal. A complete evidence package is attached. I have secured it with multiple redundancies. I expect to present my findings to the full board at your earliest possible convenience. I will be waiting. Sincerely, Elias Vance, former head of compliance. I stared at the send button. This was it, the point of no return. I thought of Julian's smug face, of Brenda's empty platitudes, of the terror I felt when I learned my daughter's healthcare was gone. I clicked send. The operation was complete. All I had to do was wait for the explosion. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. For 12 hours, there was nothing. No reply, no call. Just the oppressive hum of my refrigerator and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I began to doubt myself. Had I miscalculated? Was the old boys club so powerful they could simply ignore a nuke? Would Henry Drummond, a man who had been with the firm for 40 years, just delete the email to protect the status quo? My phone finally rang at 10:07 a.m. The caller ID was blocked. Mr. Vance. The voice was dry, aged, and carried an unmistakable weight of authority. Yes, this is Henry Drummond. I'm in the west lobby of the Omni Hotel on Fifth Avenue. You have 10 minutes? The line went dead. I threw on the suit I'd had dry cleaned for this exact possibility. It felt like armor. The taxi ride through city traffic was agonizingly slow. I walked into the Omni lobby and there he was, sitting in a wingback chair, looking exactly as he did in his corporate photos. Stoic, severe, with eyes that had seen decades of market booms and busts. He wasn't alone. Robert Sterling, the general, counsel who had overseen my firing, sat beside him looking distinctly uncomfortable. Mr. Vance Drummond said, gesturing to the chair opposite them, "No pleasantries. Your allegations are ... extraordinary. You understand the consequences if even one piece of your evidence is found to be fabricated." "I understand completely," I said, my voice steady. "You also understand the consequences for the firm if it's all true." Robert shifted in his seat. "Elias, this is highly irregular ... Drummond cut him off with a flick of his wrist. "Be quiet. Robert, you were CC'd on the email. You've seen the attachments. Is there any part of this that strikes you as false?" Robert's face was pale. "The chain of custody for his Exhibit D is ... questionable. But the OFAC report on Sokolov is public record. Julian knew, and we can't prove he didn't." He trailed off, the implication hanging in the air. Drummond's gaze bored into me. "The shareholder meeting is underway. Julian Croft is scheduled to speak in 1 hour. What exactly do you want?" This was the moment. The final confrontation, not with Julian, but with the power that enabled him. I want to be reinstated, my record cleared, and my back pay compensated. That's the starting point. But right now, what you want is to stop a criminal from representing this firm on its biggest stage of the year. You have a choice, Mr. Drummond. You can handle this quietly in the boardroom right now. Or you can let Julian walk up to that podium and I will forward my evidence package to the Wall Street Journal and the SEC Enforcement Division at the exact moment he begins to speak. I placed my burner phone on the table between us. You have 9 minutes. Drummond stared at the phone, then at me. A long, tense moment passed. He finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Robert, get security. Meet us in boardroom C and tell the event coordinator that Mr. Croft's presentation has been ... postponed." Walking back into the Sterling Tower felt surreal. This time, I wasn't the one being escorted out. I was the one being led to the seat of power. We entered boardroom C, a cavernous room paneled in dark wood. The rest of the board was being assembled, pulled discreetly from the main event. Whispers and confused looks followed us, and then he arrived. Julian strode in, flushed. With success, his keynote speech notes in hand. He saw me, and his face went through a rapid series of micro-expressions. Confusion, annoyance, dawning horror. "What the hell is this, Henry?" he demanded, his voice tight. "And what is he doing here?" "Sit down, Julian," Drummond said, his tone leaving no room for argument. What followed was not a shouting match, but a cold, clinical execution. Drummond didn't let me speak. He conducted the proceedings himself, using my evidence as his script. "Julian," he began, "we have received credible evidence that Project Chimera constitutes a significant violation of federal law." He presented the OFAC report. Julian blustered. "This is absurd." "Our due diligence was thorough. Vance signed off on it himself." "We have an expert opinion that suggests the signature was forged," Drummond said calmly, sliding the affidavit across the table. Julian's bravado began to crack. "This is his word against mine. He's a disgruntled employee." Then came the twist I had saved, the one detail I hadn't included in the email, my final piece of leverage. "Actually, it's not his word against yours," I said, speaking for the first time. The entire room turned to me. "It's your word against your own." I looked directly at Julian. "It's a secret due diligence report you commissioned on Sokolov. It's the one you kept on your personal cloud drive. It's the one you accessed from your home network at 11:47 p.m. on October 12th, the night before you forged my signature." The color drained from Julian's face. It was a detail so specific, so impossible for me to know through legitimate channels that it served as absolute proof. It told him I had been inside his fortress, inside his life. I had seen his secrets. He didn't know how, and that was the beauty of it. The unknown terrified him more than the accusation itself. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the faces around the table, his peers, his mentors, and saw no support. He saw only cold, hard judgment. In their eyes, he was no longer a rainmaker. It was a liability that could sink the entire ship. Robert Drummond set into the silence. "Please escort Mr. Croft to his office to collect his things. His network access is to be terminated immediately. He is not to speak to anyone. Security will see him out of the building." Symmetry was poetic. The exact same words used to shatter my life were now being used to end his dot. Julian stood up, his multi-thousand-dollar suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. He gave me one look, a cocktail of pure hatred, disbelief, and a sliver of what looked like fear. Then he turned and walked out of the room, a ghost leaving his own haunting. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Drummond looked at me. "Mr. Vance, I believe we have a number of things to discuss, starting with your new role." The revenge was complete. It wasn't loud or violent. It was a quiet, professional dismantling, executed with the very tools of the trait he had disdained. He was beaten not by rage, but by a memo, a log file, and a forgotten clause. The fallout was both immediate and seismic. By self-reporting the OFAC violation to the Treasury and the SEC, guided by the very evidence I had compiled, Sterling Asset Management managed to avoid the corporate death penalty. They were hit with a massive 9-figure fine and placed under a 3-year monitorship, but they survived. The public story was carefully managed. A rogue managing director had acted alone, and the firm's robust internal controls, personified by me, had uncovered the fraud. Julian Croft was not so lucky. He faced a slew of federal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His assets were frozen. His name, once a byword for success in the financial world, became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. He was professionally, financially, and socially annihilated. Leo Maxwell, the sycophantic VP, was a minor footnote, quietly fired for his expense fraud and forced to pay restitution, his career ambitions turning to dust. As for me, the negotiations with Drummond and the board were swift and decisive. Didn't just want my old job back. I wanted a fundamentally new position. They agreed. I was reinstated as Senior Vice President, global head of a newly created division, the Enterprise Risk and Integrity Group. It was my old compliance role, but with real teeth. I reported directly to the audit committee and the CEO. I had veto power over any deal. At any level that I deemed a material risk. My salary was doubled. My bonus was a seven-figure number that I immediately used to pay off every current and future medical bill for Clara, establishing a trust that would ensure she would never have to worry about the cost of her care again. That, more than any professional vindication, was the true victory. Walking back into the office was a strange experience. The whispers that followed me were no longer suspicious. They were tinged with awe and a healthy dose of fear. I was no longer Elias, the friendly but firm compliance guy. I was Vance, the man who had taken down Julian Croft. My first act was to promote Nina Sharma to be my new director of investigations. Her talent and courage deserved to be rewarded. "You took a huge risk for me, Nina," I told her as she sat in my new, larger office overlooking the city. "I just did what was right," she said, a small, determined smile on her face. "You taught us to do that." I came to terms with the moral lines I had crossed. Accessing Julian's network, using social engineering, they were not the actions of a Boy Scout. But I felt no guilt. I had been pushed into a corner, my family's well-being threatened by a man who operated without rules. I simply chose to fight back on his terms, but with more intelligence and precision. My professional ethics were about protecting the integrity of the system. In this case, I had to step outside the system to save it from itself. It was a paradox I could live with. Weeks later, a package arrived at my office. There was no return address. Inside was an expensive bottle of single malt scotch and a simple typewritten note. "Well played. R.S. Robert Sterling, the General. Counsel." It was a quiet acknowledgement from one pragmatist to another. It's a sign of respect. My life found a new normal, one built on a foundation of true security, not the illusion of it. I had learned that loyalty is a two-way street and that true power isn't about a title or the size of a bonus. It's about knowing the rules so well that you know exactly how and when to break them for the right reasons. Sometimes I look out my window at the sprawling city below. I think about the thousands of people like Julian Croft, brimming with ambition and convinced that the rules don't apply to them. They see people like me as obstacles, as numbers on a spreadsheet. They forget that sometimes the quiet, meticulous man in the corner office is the one who knows where all the bodies are buried and holds the only map, okay? And he will not hesitate to use it.